Welcome to Savvy Business, Life Unscripted, with your host, Christina Rivera, where our guests share their wisdom and valuable business tips, empowering our audience to expand their personal potential.
Hi, Richard. I thank you so much for coming today to talk about your wonderful book. Richard Dixon talking about his latest book, Dying for Success. Wow. And can a lot of people relate to that? I know myself many years ago when I got out of corporate America to work as a consultant, I was killing myself for success, or this idea of success. I wrote a book last year to talk about that. But you wrote a very, your memoirs to talk about your amazing recovery and miraculous success at the hand of adversity. Because what's amazing is sometimes the most difficult things in life can be the most amazing experiences to transform you and bring you places you never would have expected. Share a little bit about your story with our savvy audience.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. I had a corporate existence, if you like. I was an explosion protection engineer, and I worked all around the world for blue chip multinational company. And then I fell seriously ill in 1999, and I collapsed and I was rushed into hospital. And unfortunately, when I was in hospital, it was an appendicitis. And it was an appendicitis that had gone gangrenous. It'd been misdiagnosed some 3 or 4 months earlier. I was initially told it was something that I'd eaten. I'd been working in Singapore. I came back. I'd had something to eat in London with my boss, and I was driving back home to Manchester. And I felt seriously poorly. And lasted for the weekend. Went to the doctor. The doctor diagnosed it as an appendicitis. I went into the hospital. They carried out tests and said, no, we don't think it is an appendicitis, and sent me home. And some 3 or 4 months later, I actually collapsed and was rushed into hospital. And at that point, I was failing. I was actually dying at that point, but they didn't know what was wrong with me. I was in and out of consciousness and one thing or another. I was too poorly for them to operate on at that stage as well. So they had to bolster me with antibiotics and drugs to get me strong enough to operate on, which they did. And they operated on me a couple of nights later. 8-hour operation. It was an appendix. It had gone gangrenous. It had burst, and it poisoned my system completely.
Oh my
and
God.
at that point, it was touch and go. And I came out with a 50-50 chance. The family were told, they were at the hospital at the time, they were told that it was 50-50. I was going into high dependency, and sadly it went the wrong 50 way, and I actually died. And of course I remember dying, which is really, really strange.
How was that experience for you?
It wasn't scary, Christina. I think, we have this conception that life passes before your eyes and all this sort of thing goes on and all the rest of it. For me, it wasn't scary. It was a very calming experience. It was very surreal. I was in a ship's dry dock, and the walls of the dock were all slime, black slime, and I'm lay belly face down on the walls of this dry dock. And everybody I knew, we were all stood around the circumference of this dry dock and all talking matter-of-factly. And I'm looking up and thinking, as I'm sliding down towards a big plug hole in the bottom of this dock, is somebody going to help me? Is somebody going to throw me a rope, a ladder, a hand, or anything? And nobody did. And I just slid down, calm as you please. I wasn't frightened. And I actually went down this big plug hole, and that was it. So from that perspective, it was it wasn't frightening, but what happened after that was frightening, and that was more terrifying, because they brought me back. And when I came back, I was of course in intensive care, but I remembered dying. So then I was psychotic, and I was having hallucinations, and it went pretty bad. I actually believed that my sister had paid a a geneticist to have me rebuilt, and she'd paid this guy, and I was made out of all sorts of different people's colours, religions, body parts.
Interesting.
It was mad, absolutely mad.
Wow, it's what happened to my brother at 3 years old is he had a burst appendicitis, and no one knew. He had gone to the hospital 3 days prior with, like you, oh, he's sick and the stomach, it's probably a stomach flu, go home. And I was babysitting him. It was my parents were out having dinner, and out of nowhere, when a baby cries like I want milk or something is one thing, but this was a cry of severe pain. It was the depths of his soul scream. And I ran to his room, and he just wouldn't stop screaming. I was like, oh my gosh, he's in pain. Something's wrong. I called my parents, and they're like, oh, he's just crying. He's a baby. I was like, no. This is not he's crying, he's a baby. This is like, there's something wrong. So my mom came home. They called the doctor. The doctor's like, I'm sure he's fine. Bring him to the office tomorrow. Well, his appendix had burst, and he was in the hospital 1 full month in intensive care. But wow, it's amazing how that happened. Now, how did your perspective shift after going through such adversity and when your health is so affected? How did you come back from that? What did that?
Well, I was in for 3 months.
3 months, wow.
And that wasn't the worst of it, because one of the first things I remembered when I was starting to come round and find some normality was I had this horrific pain in my left leg, and I just couldn't get to the bottom of what this pain was in my left leg. And of course, I'd got pneumonia, I'd got total organ failure, I'd got toxin shock, I was on all sorts of machines to keep me breathing and things, but I just got this horrific pain, and I couldn't get anybody to take any notice. And eventually, as I became a little bit stronger and I became off the machines, the physiotherapist wanted to get me out of bed and get me into the gym and start to get me a little bit mobile again, but I couldn't walk. I couldn't move. My left leg was in so much pain, I couldn't even show my foot to the floor. It was absolutely horrific. And then eventually it was diagnosed in the gymnasium one day. I was kind of hanging off these parallel bars, holding on for grim death, when one of the physios said to me, look, Richard, we've seriously got a problem here, clearly, with the pain and everything else. It looks to us as though your femoral nerve isn't working in your left leg. So we don't know why. Let's just find out what the situation is, and we'll get further tests done. So on that basis, they did. And about a week later, I was in the dialysis suite having kidney dialysis. I was in for about 4 hours when these 3 doctors came to visit me and said, unfortunately, we've had the results back from the tests, and your femoral nerve is severed and you will never walk again. You will be permanently disabled. Now, that was like being hit with a baseball bat, because immediately you're thinking, whoa, hold on a minute. How can this happen to me?
Yeah.
I'd got a big job. I'd got 2 young children. I was active. I didn't smoke or any of these things. And I just couldn't comprehend what had happened. The fact that, I was going to be permanently disabled. And I actually turned 35 whilst I was in hospital as well. So that was my perspective after that was very, very different, because of course I was discharged. I was recently divorced and I lived on my own at that stage. And I went home to an empty house on crutches, and I had to set to and rebuild my life, which of course was just absolutely in pieces.
Yeah. Well, you've certainly come out the other end amazingly, but it's not easy to come from one side to the other side. How did you work through that to come to a point where, okay, it's happened, I'm going to move forward? How did you work through that?
It's about choices. It's about decisions. It's about changing your attitude and your mindset. And I clearly had a huge challenge. And I had to, first of all, get my mental health sorted out. So I was seeing a psychiatrist who initially I was supposed to see him for 6 weeks, every Thursday for 6 weeks. But in actual fact, I saw him every Thursday for a year. And by the time I'd finished with him, he needed help. But he diagnosed that I got PTSD and obviously depression, which under the circumstances isn't surprising. So I then had to reinvent myself and change my mindset and make some decisions.
Wow.
And the first thing I had to do was try and look after myself first of all. And you can't help other people. You know, I was no good to anybody. I was no good to my young children. I was no good to anybody until I actually got my own shit together, if you like, and I started doing jigsaws on the floor in the front room of the house. I started doing jigsaws just to try and get some thinking, you know, because I just couldn't think. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't think at all. So I had to kind of reinvent these plans step by step each day to try and make myself stronger and make better choices.
Yeah.
And that's where the dog came in, Ellie here, because as I came out of hospital, she was only 6 months old.
Oh.
And a Dalmatian, as you know, is a proper handful, and all they want is love, exercise, and food. And she couldn't understand why I was in the situation I was in, clearly, and it wasn't her fault. So she gave me the, as a mentor, if you like, which is a strange thing to say about a dog, but I know that you're a dog lover.
Yeah.
It was easy for me to understand where she was coming from, and she forced me to get out of bed in the morning. And there were times, Christine, I just wanted to die.
Yeah.
You know, I really did just want to die. And of course, I was the victim as well from a mental perspective. It was, why has this happened to me? You know, I've never done anything wrong. I've never done anything to anybody or broken the law or anything like that. How can this happen to me? You know, I went in with something relatively simple. It should have been diagnosed. It wasn't. I died. They brought me back. You know, and they brought me back to punish me more by making me disabled with all these challenges. So I had to really find strength. And it was about making decisions and going off in a new direction and making a new life, small steps at a time, to try and reach the final goal, which with me was ultimately to walk again.
Yeah, absolutely.
And be able to provide. And I was also told, you see, that when I left, that I was only ever do a sedentary job. And when I had a big job, you know, as an explosion protection engineer, and I was going on silos, I was working in pharmaceuticals, in gas and oil, and all these companies around the world, for somebody to say you'll only ever sit behind a desk and have a pen, I just couldn't accept that. And it was that drove me forward, really.
Yeah, I love that. I'm getting a couple of big lessons that came out for you. One is that you just refuse to accept what you're seeing before you, and there has to be new outcomes. And the fact that you refuse to do that and you made a decision. What's the next step? Small step. And one of the things I've got from a lot of our wonderful past savvy guests is that a lot of people will take a big adversity and say, how do I overcome this? And they'll think, how do I do it all at once? I want to get to the other side. And really it's not an all at once thing. It's what's my first step for today? I can't think about 10 steps or 100 steps. I got to think about what's the first thing I can do today to start moving forward, and what's the outcome I want.
You have to plan. You know, you start off, you think, right, okay, well, ultimately I'd like to be here, but it's just too big a challenge, and therefore I'll give up now before I even start. And that's the easiest thing to do. Whereas if you think, well, I need to get my head straight, what can I do to do that? And another thing that I did, I actually decided that I would build a model aeroplane and fly it. And so I thought, and I'm not going to buy a kit or anything. I'm actually just going to buy the plans, and I'm going to buy all the parts and materials and everything, and I'm actually going to build it, and I'm going to fly it. That was a challenge. And I did. And it on its second flight, it crashed. And the thing was smashed to pieces, but that didn't matter. I'd achieved what I set out to do, and it helped me get mentally strong and focus and understand the steps and where I needed to go to achieve what I did. So the fact that it crashed didn't make any difference to me at all. I'd actually won that goal, and then it was on to the next challenge.
And that is a great piece of wisdom there, because it's not about, you had a failure, you get up, you move on, but the fact that you actually accomplished what you set out to do, and one small incremental goal, you're like, boom, accomplished. I now build a sense of confidence.
Yeah.
And so that sense of confidence leads into compound confidence, or compound interest, compounded confidence. As you keep compounding that confidence, you begin to, okay, I could do this. And you keep moving further and further forward.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And that's what you need to do. I remember one occasion I was trying to teach myself to walk again,
Mhm.
to get off the crutches. And I was quite an outgoing, outlooking, person,
Mhm.
and I'd become very insular. I didn't like going out. I didn't want to meet people. I felt a failure. I felt as though I was a hindrance to people.
Mhm.
I was completely out of my comfort zone all the time. And of course, I was on crutches, and people were constantly asking me why I was on crutches. And I was on crutches for 2.5 years.
Mhm.
So I was lucky enough to become part of a program at a hospital where they made this bionic leg for me, which gave me a mechanical ankle, a mechanical knee. It had a control plate that went under my shoe, and it enabled me to actually get off the sticks and start taking some steps. But of course, that wasn't good enough for me. Over a period of time, I wanted to learn to walk without that.
Mm.
So I wanted to dump the bionic leg, as I called it, and start to walk normally.
Mhm.
And I started to try and get around the house and take some steps on my own, and something and another. My leg just give. The problem with the femoral nerve, Christina, is that it controls all the muscles and mechanisms in your leg. It's a nerve, obviously. It's one of the largest nerves we have in our bodies.
I didn't know
And
that.
if it's severed, so your leg is kind of floppy. You can't put any weight through your knee. Your leg doesn't work. You can stick pins in your leg and you can't feel anything. You get electrocuted frequently because of the nerve damage. So I'm in constant pain all the time.
Mm.
And I went to the doctor to see a consultant for a checkup. And he said to me, Richard, how are you doing? He says, oh, doc, I'm doing great.
Mm.
Wait till you see this that I've started to be able to do now. So he says, well, what are you doing? I said, look at this. I can take a few steps now. I can walk. And he goes, oh,
Yeah.
stop. So just sit down. So he sat down. He said, what are you doing? I said, look, I can start to take some steps and walk.
Mhm.
And he said, look, what you're doing here, he says, I'll tell you how this is going to end up. He said, you are loading other parts of your body that isn't designed to work in the way that you're forcing it to work. And you're going to create different complications and different pains in different areas of your body. And ultimately, you'll end up in a wheelchair.
Oh my.
Sooner than later.
Uh-huh.
So give that up and just stay with your leg and your crutches, and you'll be fine. And again, being the kind of attitude I have is, well, actually, I'll prove you wrong.
Yes.
Because it's all right for you to say that,
Mhm.
but this is my life, and I'll take my chances because I think that I can do this. And I have done it. And it was the same. It was the same with the pain threshold. It's very easy to get addicted to the painkillers because you're in a lot of pain.
Yeah.
Or nearly all the time. The pain is there all the time. It's just at what level it may be. And with nerve damage, it doesn't need a reason to be high or low. You just don't know where it's going to be from 1 minute to the next. But I soon realized that I needed to get off the painkillers. I did not want to be reliant on painkillers or anything like that. So the alternative for me was to increase my pain threshold. So I thought, I'm going to suffer the pain. I'll learn to increase my pain threshold, and I will get off the drugs and the painkillers, which I did.
Wow.
So it's about making these decisions. And yes, that each step at a time, small steps, achieve it, great, move on to the next thing until eventually everything starts to link together and you start to get to where the ultimate goal is and where you need to be.
Wow.
It's about being positive.
Yeah, I get that. And it's a great, another great wisdom. We had a guy on several years ago who had been burned 80% of his body in this work catastrophe, and another guy next to him was also burned, I think 80% of his body. One guy was like, I'm gonna die, this is horrible, I'm never gonna get over it. Of course he did die. And the guy who came on my show, of course, did not die, but he said, I just kept saying, this is unacceptable, I've got to get back to my life. And he just had that attitude of him plowing forward on, and people were amazed. He healed so much more quickly than the other burn victims, but he was just this attitude like, no, this is not acceptable. And that's what I'm getting from you, that you would not accept the outcome that they were giving you. You're like, no, that's not what I want.
No, your positive mental attitude is absolutely everything. It counts for so much. If you want to become the victim, Christina, I was well insured. I had a big job and I was well insured. So I was fortunate enough at that time when I came home from hospital and I sat there on the floor crying. But the mortgage was paid off. So I could have sat there and felt sorry for myself and watched daytime TV, and that could have been it. That could have been my life. Mm-hmm. But what kind of life is that? That's not what I was about. I felt as though I'd been hard done by. I felt as though I'd had everything stolen from me. And I wanted to set an example. My two young children, Oliver and Jack, who were only about 5 and 3 at that time, they'd no idea what was going on. And things were traumatic enough at that point because I'd recently got divorced from the mother. So, it's about setting examples as well. And it's choice. It's choosing. It's a choice. And even now, I still suffer from depression. But I know now when to recognize the symptoms. And then I'll deal with that. And I won't let it bring me down. I was absolutely determined that I wasn't going to let the disability determine who I was and what had happened to me. It's no good looking back. It's no good keep looking back. It's no good looking in that mirror. Once you've passed it, once it's done, once it's gone, it's gone. What we need to deal with is where we are now and where we're going. Yeah. And how we're going to get there to where we want to be. Yeah. And that's it. And people quite often, when we do, I work with a colleague of mine from a coaching company, Shirley Ficken, and we've been running these workshops to help people that are in this black hole, if you like, and get out of it. And we've been helping executives for the National Health Service over here and one thing or another, because of course the trauma and what we're facing with the pandemic and so on and so forth, as we know worldwide, it's been absolutely massive. And it's been very, very well received. And people will say to me, we do it on Zoom, so we're able to do it wherever we need to do it, because obviously we can't see people at the moment. And it's been very successful. But people will say to me on the Q&A later on, do you wish it not happened? And I actually say, well, it's a big question, that, but I have no regrets. I am what I am. It's got me where I am today. I wouldn't be where I am today if it hadn't happened. That was the direction, and that was it. I had no say over it. It wasn't a decision that I made, how it happened or when it happened or if it happened. Most people just sail through life without any dramas or traumas, and that's fantastic. That's how I think it should be, but it just wasn't going to work out like that for me. Yeah. So I have no regrets, and I do believe that everything happens for a reason. And sometimes the reason isn't apparent, and we can chase that reason all our lives, and all of a sudden something might happen that thinks that's why, and that's why it happened. But I have no regrets. I only look forward.
That is totally wonderful, Richard, because you can stay stuck in the why, how, and it'll get you nowhere, instead of just focusing on, okay, what can I do with what I have today and how can I move forward? And it's such an inspiration for anyone listening in. There might be people, as you said, maybe minimal to little traumas in their life, but still maybe depressed or going through whatever they're going through internally, to realize, okay, Richard here's had some very difficult physical issues, but everyone has their own stuff, whether it's physical, mental, psychological, but we can work through them just one step at a time, make that decision to move forward. And it's not a one-step process. It's it's a journey through life that you'll continue to have your issues and your struggles, but you can get through it.
And it's keeping it real. Putting it in perspective. Yeah. And keeping it real, keeping your feet on the ground, and just working it through. Yeah. Remaining positive. We can do anything that we want to do. You just need a plan.
Yeah. And
And
the
then you
first,
start to instigate the plan and you'll get there.
and what I love about that puzzle you're doing at the beginning there, the jigsaw puzzle, it's, you think, okay, how did that work to the end result? It doesn't matter. One step in front of the other. Today you're having trouble with brain fog. Okay, so what can I do today? Maybe some puzzles of any sorts, or maybe I can read a book. Whatever it is that gets you engaged and gets you one step further towards the direction you want to go. It doesn't have to be, it's not the end result. And I think that's one thing that people miss is, I want to get to the end result and they're thinking so much about the end. What's the one step I can take right now, right here, today?
That makes the difference.
Yeah.
And little things can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
And it's just finding those little things. It's understanding. And another thing as well is it's accepting help. It's I think for men in particular, I think it can be, and this is something that Shirley and I talk about in our workshop. I think it's very hard for men sometimes to accept help, and it can be seen as a weakness. For a man, male chauvinist, big, strong as we are, I'm 6'2". I'm a big guy, but at the end of the day, I didn't want to accept any help. I had my head so far up my backside, I thought I could solve it all on my own, and I couldn't. And people were offering help, and then I would think that they were feeling sorry for me, or something along those lines, and that wasn't the case at all. People were genuinely concerned. They wanted to help me. They wanted to get me back on track, see me do well, see me recover, and become back to the person that I was before. And it took me a long time to get into that headspace where I would accept that, because I thought I could do it alone, and I couldn't. And I thought I was bigger than the problem, and I could solve it, and I couldn't. So I needed to accept that help, and I did. And I think accepting help and kindness shows a strength.
It does.
It's not a weakness.
Yeah.
And I kind of got around that in my own head, because I suddenly thought, well, let's put the shoe on the other foot. And if I had somebody who was really close to me, be it a friend or a family member, somebody like that, that was in that sort of situation, I would want to help them.
Yeah.
And how would I help them? And how could I help them? And therefore, how would I feel? So on that basis, I kind of turned it round, and I thought, yeah, okay, and I accepted help, and immediately things start to get better. You start to feel better. People are being kind. Want, show you kindness and help you. It helps. It's a way to go, definitely.
Yeah, and this is just a wonderful insight, wisdom to end on. It's so true. The accepting of help is a gift that you give others, allowing them to accept. That's one thing I had to learn a long time ago. Someone would give you a compliment. You're like, no, not this old thing. And you're like, no, just say thank you. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, just say thank you. No, but it's a lesson that, sometimes from time to time we can forget. But I don't want people to leave without finding how they can get their very own copy of Dying for Success. How can they do that?
Well, they can buy it through the website, or they can go directly onto Amazon. The website is www.dyingforsuccess.com, or they can just look up Dying for Success Richard Dixon on Amazon, and they'll find it there. And there's also the Audible available, Christina. And they can get that again through Amazon, or it can be on Audible or Scribd or Apple. It's everywhere.
That's great.
So you can get it through any of the normal channels.
And that's great. A lot of people are in the run and maybe traveling every day by car is a great way to hear your story as well, if they can't have time to read it.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, one of the things I do now is helping people. And if I can help anybody, we speak about this. Obviously, we're able to do it with Zoom now, which means we can do it anywhere over the world, which is fantastic. It might be in the middle of the night occasionally, but hey ho, bit of red eye doesn't do you any harm, does it? No. So if people want anything or want to track me down, get in touch, please do. Everything's there on the website. It's easy to find.
Dyingforsuccess.com, correct? Awesome.
Lovely. That's it.
Awesome. Well, Richard, I just have to thank you again, Richard Dixon, for coming to share your great wisdom today on Savvy Broadcasting. Thank you.
Christina, thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Like, subscribe, and share this episode. To listen to more savvy episodes and savvy biz tips, go to www.lifeunscriptedradio.com. To find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or how to become a guest, email Christina at lifeunscriptedradio.com.